exciting group, and part of the research seminars is a way for BTH to represent a kind of reflective and critical response to many of the artistic practices that have been ongoing throughout the project as we're moving forward.
Let me just start with the exhibitions, and you can go to the first slide. Yeah, just saying that what exhibition it was. This was a show I did with the Swiss-Austrian duo called Übermorgen at Overgaden in Copenhagen in 2006. And if you go to the first slide of that show, you will see what looks like a very traditional white cube gallery exhibition of paintings.
It's me playing with John Cage. I worked with him in Paris, the American Center. And we had, in this particular, is from a performance we did with, I had a solo on 2 dry leaves, a stick, a cactus, and I think I had it was only the organics, but it sounded like paper. And he was standing there doing a clock with his body. When it was down here, the performance was finished. I hope I can stick to his idea. I'm probably going to pass the time. Anyway, this was very inspiring, of course, and these were times in Paris when very much was discussed, fluxes and how to deal with everything. Everything was questioned. It's very hard to define, and nobody has, in fact, defined what is reality. Reality for him is when you can see your hands. If you can see your hands, you think that you are in the space you are, which is why, just as an anecdote, I was never into the goggle idea of presenting a 3D experience, because you can't see your hands. Whereas if you stand in the cave and you see your hands, you tend to believe it more. That's all. But reality, I don't know what it is, virtual or isn't everything, is it an illusion?
I made this show in Örebro now March this year, and it's a black surface like this, and it's going to be white in 13 hours, and 33 pixels are turning white every other second, following this music. And the music is, I have used Johann Sebastian Bach's Goldberg variations. And I don't know if you are familiar with the piece, but it's kind of an iconic piano piece that you, if you are a really successful pianist, you probably want to have a recording of this piece. And I really, I like it a lot. And if you play it as it should be played, it takes about 30 minutes. Very well. It's an aria and then 30 variations of this area. And I have taken every single anslag. What is that? Beat, stroke of the piano. Stroke. Note. And I play every note in every other second as well, so it becomes 13 hours altogether. I often find myself happy with a piece when there's nothing else to it, and what I mean is that when I start working with this, I often have a lot of aesthetics and ideas about aesthetics, and those ideas about aesthetics kind of feel obsolete or in the way almost, and in that sense I can sometimes I feel happy when and I start to feel a little bit myself like a researcher, because I try to remove all the aesthetics and present this is it in a way. So I was just thinking about that when you're, so in that way I've been, I don't know if that's an answer to the question, but
there's no real answer. I'm not looking for an answer. It's more
on the opposite side, you know, sometimes when I create an intervention, I begin to feel like an artist again. You know, because then it suddenly leaves this kind of realm of you know, organizing everything and getting the teachers and the children, you know, everything organized and the devices out, and then in the sense that, you know, just the same feeling that I have coming from the kind of the opposite side. So,
Yeah, and I don't think all creative practice is a research method. For me, it's important to allow for creative practice to cover a broader terrain, and some portion of that will occupy the domain of research, artistic research. But I think that for creative practice to be artistic research, there are other criteria. A different engagement with methodology and with depth of concept, and a certain sort of reflexivity that doesn't need to be there if we're just making work as an artist.
This piece I prepared for my solo exhibition in Center of Modern Art in Gdańsk, and it's called Classmates, and it was like I think that was like playing between two factors, like organic and artificial, real and virtual, and obviously this chairs reminds or they are kind of metaphor of human body, which are determined by technology, functionality, and one time I put them in a different context. Here they are like office workers, next time like a group of players which are lost in reality, and finally take a place in gallery, observe a video and became a cinema viewers. And this piece was inspired by emptiness, which was very interesting. It was kind of tension which became happening in the Second Life in the 90s. There was very crowded place. The platform is very crowded place, and plenty of citizens, mansions, and after a few years it just became a kind of digital rubbish, totally empty. And this work is it was like 24 square meters of light. I used a different kind of light for that, some strobo lamps, some neon lamps, and during the time the color changed the spectrum of color, so the effect was pretty surprising.
So we talked about the panorama of London, which has been destroyed and no longer exists, but if it will load, I can show it to you in Argonne. Let's see, some of it has started loading here. So this is not, this etching that survives of the panorama of London is not an equirectilinear panorama. So in this application, you can see it looks a little distorted. But we can kind of reanimate this lost 18th century panorama and get some sense of what it was like to see it in the 1790s.
I agree. It's very difficult to communicate these kind of installation experiences after they've happened. We worked on a large-scale AR version of a play once, and wanted to somehow preserve it, and so turned it into a flash game on the computer because it needed interaction, it needed spatiality, right? But it's still, that's a totally different project, really. It's only ever some kind of representation of the first thing, or it becomes something else entirely.
This is the facade after already the matte facade, where again everything is adjusted perfectly to the surface. The basic idea was to have 12 loops with audio, where none of the loops were using the same pixels in the same time, so there is no overlapping if there are two people switching on, or more people switching on more buttons.
And the same with the audio.
And the audio as well was composed in such a way that in any combination it could make a different song, but not a noise, for sure.
Every track would exist by itself, but even if, let's say, 5 or 12 of them are initiated, it still sounded as a regular something nice to hear, not like a big mess. So it was composed by our friend artist, Jerzy Rusi. So it was meant like each piece, each part of this 12 pieces coexist together or separate.
So mathematically, to explain it, how many combinations we had, it's 2 on 12. It's something like 160,000 different combinations of picture and songs could come out. Yeah, maybe let's see.
There's a recording our work, because it's usually it needs darkness, and of course when you are recording you need some light. So.
And here another
But the
problem
cameras
was
are
that
getting better and better.
the distance was really short, something like 50 meters for the camera to have 40 meter of angle. It was really not really cool. But you can see that people are here and light, and they are already on the field of interaction. They are switching on and switching off kind of loops. But at least the experience again, it's much better because the audience is much closer. You have an interaction with, you feel them. It's not like just a video, but you just push the button and the play button, and everybody can watch the movie as a cinema and they leave. Now you feel it, and of course it has a big impact on the effect at the end, that you have real audience over there, and it's not just an internet YouTube video and they can watch it. Maybe the same because you can record it after that.
Yeah, and during this audiovisual performances we are cooperating with the sound artists and making the picture and the music live.
Because this is life. How will we do it? So what makes sense for me only to see the product? I'm not a consumator. I don't need that. I really want to be engaged. Not only with the research, perhaps already in the process. And there I think we have to work out what this means in time of digitality. You can think about what I told you right now and identify with it. And I love dirtiness. I really do. A lot of projects are not working out because teams are crashing down. And many times they don't do it by physical meetings, they do it on the digital way. And this is interesting, why does this happen?
And that everyone else is like, oh yeah, performance, you know, performance. But if you actually stop and think about it, everyone means something slightly different by performance. And today, an overview based on some of the comments and some of the work is that performance can be construed as there being a live component. So performance and liveness, or there being a stage, a rehearsed and a stage element. Now, I'm interested in notions of performance as emergence. So this relates to the Austinian speech act, where certain speech acts are actually constructive of reality. So certain very powerful, important things that we say, like, I promise, I dare you, I do. You know, these are words, but they also change reality. So what I would like you to do now is have your garment, whether it's your hat, your scarf, your jacket, and I would like you to give it to someone. And everyone, okay. You're sending out the heart rate, and you're receiving breath. And think of how you're receiving it. It might be being received as warmth, as pressure, as sound, as etc.
Performers and talk a little bit of theory. Although we do have theory in computer science, it is also a relatively new domain. At least modern digital computer science is only about 50 years old or so. And I want to talk a little bit about returning to the experience, because my field of research is technology-enhanced learning, specifically mobile learning. And mobile learning is something different, especially when you have a mobile device in your hand, because it raises many challenges that we heard about today. Is how do you create or design an experience that ensures that learners are actually doing the learning and not, running off and talking about sports and music and, engagements of the crown, the princess of Sweden.
To call their sailors home, sending out a discordant plea, a cord as a kind of string where the men could grab it and hold to pull their way back. Women, with their backs to the rocks and their backs to the boulders, facing the sea, used to send their calls across the Baltic in dissonant waves. It was a rocky blending that refused to settle, an uncomfortable disharmony that told the truth that some bodies may never join or find their way together. What can we see in the sand, we ask? What can we dig within and what can we find beneath? Whole villages, they say, are lost in the sand. But what can we see on the stone that's etched in and mythologized?
Var är du som gav mig en fisk som var biten i baken? Var är du som klappade mig när jag låg stilla vaken? Gud välsigne ditt hannalag. Du får klappa mig natt och dag i alla mina levnadsdagar, så länge vår Herre behagar.
As I'm sure some of you experience, when the music happens and the singing, there's something in it that's just very deeply kind of touching, and we were trying to think of a trigger point that we could just start to think about working today, and this kind of idea of echoes and echo, we were kind of looking for themes, and we realized after trying out various things that echo, and as you say, it's already embedded this echo, and then Daniel and I met separately to talk, and we started talking about these ecosystems, and then all of a sudden I thought, wait, echoes and echoing and waves and sound waving, it sort of all came together in that way.
What we're actually doing, where it started, is I started this leader project with a youth group. One youth group here in Blekinge, one in South Estonia and one in Northeast Poland. So there are approximately 30 youth and folk musicians and pedagogues involved in this. And we've been going on since February 2011, and we were gone to the summer. So we were actually working with trying to find culture connections, and which will show that we are unique but also in common. We have some kind of a common identity. But what we tell EU is that we learn teaching the youth project management and networking, and then we can do culture in that, which is quite interesting to see how these youth are growing. And learning and taking initiatives, and suddenly lifting up a finger and saying, "Oh, I recognize this. I've seen this before somewhere when I was in Estonia, when I was in Poland."
One of the things I really appreciated about the two of you was the nuance, the subtlety of when you were louder and when you were softer and when you came in and when you stopped. And I could tell it was because you were in process and it wasn't a very strictly scripted thing. But because I'm reading a lot and thinking a lot about affect now and intensities, I thought that was such a really good example of the fine-grained quality of responding and subtly making changes that we're now demanding from our technologies, and our technologies are promising it, but they can't do it yet. And I don't know if they ever will. And I've just finished writing a paper on the Affexity project, and looking at affect theory, there's this notion of gradients, like grades, and what we're wanting more and more is the ability to slide across them. You're doing that quite a lot with your work too, so sliding across with more degrees of subtlety. And it was so nice to see it done live, because it's like we are the masters of subtlety and gradients, particularly when we're very immersed in the art forms that we do. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated that.
Nice.